Okay, good morning. This is the Friday, October 16th, 2020 meeting being held remotely of the Affordable Housing Trust Working Group. I'm calling this meeting to order at 8:10 a.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust Working Group will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: via Westborough TV, that is Charter 192 and Fios 28, on the westboroughTV.org website, or on the Westborough TV YouTube channel. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So with that, quickly go over the agenda here. We'll post it for the viewers to see. Okay, so we'll start out very briefly with a discussion and vote on, as far as approval of the minutes from our October 2nd, 2020 meeting. We'll head into the community function and provide an outreach update and sort of review the schedule. We'll move into governance and process. We have town council feedback and edits on the warrant articles, including the addition of a bylaw to the town bylaws. We'll cover that, and we've made the comparable changes to the declaration of trust. At that point, we can do any other business. There's some new things to chat about for the committee, for our working group, and then given the content of the agenda, I expect we will adjourn at or before 9 a.m. this morning. So on that note, let me stop presenting here. And so the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from October 2nd. Do I have a motion?
I move we accept the minutes as printed.
A second, Durrett.
Okay, any comments, corrections? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the roll call vote. Mr. Durrett.
Durrett, yes.
Mr. Bain.
Bain, yes.
Mr. Rauch.
Roush, yes.
Rauch, yes, and Edinburgh, yes. So we approve the minutes, the vote of 400 for being present. Okay, excellent. I'll dive into community outreach. And let me just get ready to pull something up here in a minute. So the community outreach has been continuing. We've done a couple of presentations. Particularly at this point, we've presented to the Diversity Inclusion Committee, as well as to the Master Plan Advisory Committee. John was there for both of those, I believe. So you can comment if you think they went well.
I did think they went well. I had hoped that the Diversity Committee would have more questions, but I thought they were very receptive. It's a small committee, so I'm not surprised, but I think they went well. I think your presentation was very well received.
Okay, cool. And so we'll go over the schedule in a minute. I'll pull that up. We've got a number of, actually I have the wrong file in front of me. We've got a number of things happening next week with respect to the planning board. the Westborough Housing Authority, Youth and Family Services, and the Youth Commission. And we're waiting to hear from the Council on Aging for their next meeting. So we'll continue to make the rounds as that goes through. And then on November 3rd, we've been invited to present to the Civic Club, as they often do a series of events leading up to, any town meeting. So the web traffic at the engagement site is actually excellent. At this point, we've had over 700 unique visitors to the site, with 53, I realize I'm counted twice on it, so 53 people have signed up as followers and are getting our updates there as well. We have about 75 to 80 comments from visitors, which is the folks at Co-Urbanize tell me is a pretty high percentage. And we've been able to respond and provide feedback to almost all of those comments as well. The site was updated last week with the copy of the presentation that we made to the Board of Selectmen. That's now the image on the homepage that goes through. Obviously our analysis and action items plan is up there, as well as we've added additional questions and are getting good feedback on the questions as well. So the sentiment analysis, at this point, we are 52% positive and 40% neutral. We're 8% negative in looking at comments that have been rated negative. That's not about the work we're doing, but about the housing situation. So if someone says, it's too expensive, I can't afford to deliver, this is awful, that's negative sentiment, even though that's not negative with respect to our effort and our initiative as well. So the site is, I feel the site's proving effective and is generally being received well. And we're having good engagement there. I'm curious if anyone has any ideas or, of other information that we should provide on the site. One of the things I had mentioned to Ed was the possibility or, the desire, maybe the need. Should we do a second style of presentation that's more directly a presentation of the introduction and executive summary of the report? Do people feel that would be useful as additional information to provide? Or provide the information in a different format?
My guess is the folks who haven't got awareness of what's going on, who aren't, don't have questions, don't have understanding, are folks who will show. Those are the small number of folks who will show up at town meeting with questions. So to me, doing some kind of a presentation at town meeting that just focuses on getting approval of the trust, that's probably the next step.
Okay.
When the feedback's telling you that everybody believes we got an affordable housing problem, and most folks want to do something to solve it. To me, the issue will be, well, why does the trust help, or how does the trust do things that don't? So again, focusing on town meeting and how do we deal with bringing up to speed folks who may not have, prior to getting there, come up to speed.
Okay. So I'm waiting to hear back specifically about how much time we have for a presentation at town meeting. It'll probably be 10 minutes. The current overview presentation that we're providing to people runs about 15. So we're going to need to trim and focus a bit. Is there someone who'd like to take the lead or help me work on that presentation for town meeting or people? Ed, I don't want to say, Ed, you're on mute, because then people with, remote meeting bingo cards will have, check that off.
I'd be happy to help you. As you've seen this past week, I've been working on some of the slide deck, et cetera, and I have think, a little bit technical skill in doing that. So
Okay.
I'd be more than happy.
Okay. Then we can get together over the next several days and
Yep.
start putting that together. Any other questions, concerns, ideas around outreach and building support?
I just think it's been amazing with the co-urbanize and your posting things to various Westborough boards, Facebook groups. That's been very, very, very helpful. And,
Okay. Okay. Then let's move on. It's like, I'm ahead of schedule, but I don't want to fill time. We can move on to governance. Okay. So our draft warrant articles are in the draft declaration of trust went off to town council for review. The focus of town council is on the materials that go with the warrant article for town meeting. So let me pull that up. I shared with everyone in preparation for this meeting both a clean version and a red line version. Let me pin it so you can see. And so what I've done here is I've brought the town council's comments and just commented on the edits. Okay, so one of the things we learned from town council is that the best way to create the trust is not only to accept the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 55C, but if we're going to make any modifications to the powers of the trust, which we are doing in our proposal by providing oversight and some of the other items we've added, that we also create an additional bylaw for the town. So that going forward, if the structure of the housing trust were to be changed at the macro level, that would be done as an amendment or a modification of the town bylaw. And so the advice is that's the appropriate way to move forward. So I'll walk through those really quickly. Stop me if folks have any questions. Okay, so in the actual warrant article itself, town council added the highlighted text, which is specifically designed to make sure that the Affordable Housing Trust works in alignment with the Community Preservation Act should Westborough at any point in the future adopt that part of Mass General Law and become a Community Preservation Act community. And so that is that addition. And there are a couple of other spots in the document where that is presented as well. Okay. In the appointment, and so basically at this point, this is the content of what will be Article 17 in the town bylaws, Affordable Housing Trust. And so this really starts with our declaration of trust and puts it in bylaw form, sort of mirroring the structure of Mass General Law as well. So in Section A, Town Council added wording that is the proper designation of staggered terms and how those start with the initial appointment of trustees. Okay, any questions there? Okay. So, Town Council, we had discussed this, and it was
a question, Alan.
Yeah.
They still have it 5 to 7. Now, would that be a decision of the Board of Selectmen of how many they want to appoint?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the way that's really, so town council questioned whether or not we really want to have a flexible number.
Right.
Their concern being that there could be confusion over what is a valid quorum. But we've been clear that a quorum is a majority of the number of seats that have been appointed. So that if it's five, if it's five, then the quorum is 3. If it's 6 or 7, then the quorum is 4. And so the town council is comfortable with that and understands that it gives the Board of Selectmen the flexibility not to rush to fill an open seat.
Okay.
Town council's interpretation, her interpretation is that the expectation is that the Board of Selectmen will look to appoint 7.
Okay.
But that if there's a vacancy and we're looking for specific expertise, it gives more time and flexibility in, if there's a vacancy or 2 in how you fill those positions. And so that you're not feeling pressured that if there's an opening and someone applies, you're filling that position immediately. That gives you time to recruit and include specific expertise. So it's unusual. It's not as common, even though there are more trusts now that are doing that. But she's comfortable with going in that 5 to 7 range.
Okay. So only if we drop below 5 do we become
right.
Non-operational.
Well, no. If you're still operational, so
well,
I mean, if
you just can't vote.
Well, you can so long as you have 3 people at the meeting, right? The issue is that
that's true.
The issue is that if you have if you're a committee of 5 and you have a vacancy, and you schedule a meeting and one person can't make it because they're right. traveling on business, and then someone is sick or has a family emergency, you have 2 people, not 3, right? Because of that right. vacancy. So at that point you don't have a quorum.
Okay, got it.
Okay. And I sort of look at, if there's a project underway, then some of the work of the trust is going to be fairly operational, and you need to be able to rely on being able to have those meetings. If you're overseeing a project and there's time-sensitive things going on, so she's comfortable with that. She did remove reference to president, treasurer, and secretary. The reason being is those terms actually have specific meanings under state law for legal entities, and give the implication that they're officers in a way that they could individually bind the trust to contracts, which legally is not the case. So the term president has been replaced by chair throughout the document. There's no need to have a treasurer type role because the town's treasurer collector manages is custodian of the funds, and the finance department will do the processing for us. And we can use the term secretary or clerk as far as who's responsible for the minutes. And as we get further down into the bylaw, you'll see where that has been spelled out a little bit. And then she added, she highlighted actually, because we had discussed this and it was still in the latest draft of the Declaration of Trust, and I wasn't sure if that was an editing error on my part or if that was our intent. But she highlighted it, and because it is something that is generally recommended and is pretty typical in housing trusts, which is that if any trustee is absent from 5 consecutive regularly scheduled meetings of the trust, except in the case of illness, the chair shall notify the Board of Selectmen, who may terminate said trustee of the trust position. So I had actually remembered that we weren't going to have this in. She recommends that we do for the following reason. Okay, the Board of Selectmen can obviously remove any trustee at any time. However, that requires a public hearing. And this clause allows the Board of Selectmen to remove a trustee for non-participation without the public hearing. And so that is seen as, she feels that's advantageous, because if you have someone who made a commitment or is unable to meet that commitment, but hasn't resigned, then the Board of Selectmen can, it can get handled in, a more, it's still public, but it's more discreet. It's, you don't have to, have a public hearing. You don't have to notify of rights of counsel, and all of the formalities that, come into play. So it's less of a, it's a more efficient means, and it's still public, but it can be seen as less humiliating and more administrative in nature. And so I put that back out for discussion. I really do want to hear opinions on this.
Well, I'm not in favor of that, because it takes the power of the electorate away from the opportunity to comment, because you could have a kangaroo Board of Selectmen, and it wasn't too long ago that we had one. Well, of course, my tenure is 50 years long, so I guess it is a little longer ago than that. But anyway, my comment is this is the government of the people. And if the people want to find out why the Board of Selectmen is removing somebody, they have a right to have it visual, and due process should happen. The alternative story to that, or I guess the corollary to that, is when appointments are made, that the appointments should be done with due diligence, and in fact, the right people should be put on and made trustees, and that should be an open process as well. So, for simplicity of government, I don't think it's ever a good answer as to why we do what we do. And so I'm against this change.
Okay, so you're against including this clause?
Yes.
Okay. So I do want to clarify that the Board of Selectmen would still have to do the removal in public meeting.
Yeah, I understand. And
right. But it just you don't need a public hearing with 14 days notice in legal counsel.
Yeah. But the thing is, if you have a kangaroo court, okay, they just do it and it's over, and they make the claim that in fact the person didn't attend, and the person's gone. And in fact, I ran for government, almost 50 years ago, a long time ago anyway, on the basis of the electorate having the right and responsibility in our form of government to make decisions on behalf of who they wanted to be governing and dealing with day-to-day operations of the town. And I'm not in favor of removing, the transparency of process just because it's simple.
Okay. Ed, Hank?
Yeah, I think we discussed that. Obviously, if we see someone not coming to meetings, and it's not because of illness or things like that, that it's an indication that they are probably no longer really interested in doing it, and that they would be approached by whoever, the chair most likely, and say, for the best of the community, perhaps you should resign at this point. Maybe at some other time you may come back on, but so you give them a little bit of a soft landing. But it is a way to still, if they're resistant, if they're adamant, no, I was appointed, et cetera, that sort of says something that maybe the Board of Selectmen, along with the town, should hear about that. Sort of following up on Steve or supporting Steve's idea. But I don't think it would be. I think in almost all cases, people will be good about it, because if they decided to join this, then it means that they want to do some work. And if they can't, for whatever reason, we can ask them to recuse themselves.
So I'm trying to remember how we handle it in some of the boards I'm involved in. I think it's incumbent upon the board to notify the selectmen if they think that the person should be removed, rather than here it basically says, if you miss 5, the board has to notify the selectmen, then make the decision. Whereas I'm suggesting maybe it's the board that makes the decision to notify the select board to remove. It's a little different in wording, but it kind of changes who's got the control.
So you're suggesting change it from the chair shall notify to the chair may notify?
Yes. Because shall requires the chair to notify the Board of Selectmen, where if you put may, the trustees themselves could make the decision to say, look, this seems like a situation where this person should be removed. So we're going to let the Board of Selectmen know.
Yeah, and the hardship on the committee only occurs, in other words, if a person who has been appointed doesn't show. The hardship on the committee to do its business only occurs when there are more appointees than 5. Because at that point, you need a quorum of 4 in any case in order to carry on business. And if this person's missing, that puts a lot of pressure on the other members of the committee to always attend. And I think that's what moves the board of trustees to move something forward to the Board of Selectmen, because they can't get done what they need to do. But again, I think it's important that as long as we have a town meeting form of government and we serve at the behest of the voters and the people we vote in to make appointments, that the general public has need of the transparency of process. And all of the things that we see to quote streamline government move us from the form that we have to something that becomes a city manager or mayor, for which all powers are delegated to that group. And the public really has, in effect, no purpose except electing the individual people who make up, the government. So, in effect, this has been my opinion ever since I became involved with politics, and I think it should stay that way.
Okay. Hank, Valeria's joined us as well. Hank or Valeria, do you have any thoughts on John's suggestion of changing it from shall to may, or whether we should pull this out completely?
Shall to may doesn't, we change it shall to may, I'm okay. The Board of Trustees are the appointing authority. As the appointing authority, they ought to have the authority to remove.
The Board of Selectmen, you meant?
Board of Selectmen, I'm sorry, yeah. They're the appointing authority. They ought to have the authority to remove.
Well, they do have that under our charter. It's just the process is different.
I don't feel strongly about it either way.
Yes, I'm sorry. I came late. I'm sorry. Yes, I think what I've been hearing for all of you. I think that you guys make a really good suggestion about it, and I think it seems like we should move forward in that way.
So you're saying we should change the wording from shall to may, or we should just pull this out?
Just not pull them out. Just
Okay.
change it the other way.
Okay. So Hank, you're comfortable pulling it out or turning shall to may?
I'd prefer to turn it to shall to may.
Okay. Valeria, shall to may. Ed, where do you fall on this?
Shall to may.
Okay. So, Steve, are you comfortable with that as a consensus?
Well, I'm going to stick to my own position. I can see what the handwriting on the wall is, but I'm going to stick to the position for the reasons I gave.
Okay. Okay, I respect that. This isn't typically something we'd have to vote on, but if people would prefer a formal vote, I'm happy to do that.
That's your call.
Okay. Well, if no one's feeling that strongly that we should have a formal vote on it. I will just, as I will present it as a, not a unanimous consensus, but a majority consensus of the working group that we change that from shall to may, and I'll have that edit made.
Actually, I think the draft says may. Under Article 6, the last paragraph, if I'm reading the red line,
Oh, on the warrant, on the declaration.
on the red declaration of trust, yeah.
Hold on, let me go to.
Well, we're looking at the article.
No, but let me look, because these, that's one.
Well, we want to make them in sync.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't check to see if the red line ended up being the final version, but
Yeah, so they both currently say shall. But I'll forward that we would like that change to may, so that the trustees, the chair, don't have to push it to the Board of Selectmen, but they have that option.
I'm looking at the PDF. Okay, I mean, you do that, but I'm looking at the PDF version. I think it says May. Declaration of Trust, draft 3 point something clean, 3 point clean.
Okay, I'll
Just double check it because
I'll double check. Okay, let me go back to the warrant. Okay, so next in the warrant was an act of the trustees, just clarification, provided that a quorum of the board is present. A majority of trustees present and voting may exercise. So that was just her clarifying her concern about the quorum rules. Pretty straightforward there. Then in the powers of the trust, the first paragraph, she added the text relevant to the Community Preservation Act. Okay, and the requirements therein. And then we had an introductory phrase for sections 8 and 9. She asked that we remove those for simplification and to keep it clear that any of these powers are executing any of these powers are at the discretion of the trustees and not a requirement to do so, just because they're listed. And so she felt it was redundant and might cause confusion or imply that the other powers we've listed are things the trust must do as opposed to things the trust could do. So that impacted 8 and 9. For number 10, this wording was just clarified that the trust isn't hiring town employees if the town is providing services, but has the option or the ability to compensate the town for services provided, which was our intent. Okay. Okay. The first part of number 13, which is to participate or join or form a partnership, corporation, or any other legally organized entity to accomplish the purposes of the trust. She said it's okay to leave this in, but be advised that it's a very rare situation and that the Department of Revenue generally frowns on doing that type of legal partnership because of the accounting complexity. Because you then have a private legal entity that is partially owned and controlled by a government entity. And so because of accounting rules for government and private entities are slightly different, it creates an accounting and reporting complexity. So it's okay to leave it if we want to, or we could pull it out and just start with to participate.
Well, I would leave it in to give the flexibility to the trustees on the basis that, let's say that the trust decided it wanted to do one of these things. The first thing that would happen, it would be reviewed by the Board of Selectmen and would probably be forwarded to town council. if the process was, let's say, flawed, the comment by town council and the board of selectmen, I think, would either nip it in the bud or fix the process so that in fact it was legal. So I don't, at this point, I think there's enough checks on what one might do following this line of thought, so that at this point, I wouldn't see it as a risk or a problem.
But would the selectmen automatically have a review of that? It sounds like this is one of the powers of the trust, as noted in section 5, that we wouldn't need any. The way my reading is that you would not need any other approval to do this.
Right.
Well,
So
it has to be legal.
right.
Well-
So it's a power of the trust, but would have to go to review by council.
Exactly.
Either,
So I think-
either council
there's-
engaged directly by the trust, or the trust would use town council.
True. And would engage. Okay.
I mean,
As long as we have a stopgap or some kind of guide rails, I agree we should leave it in.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then we will leave that in. Okay. In our oversight for the Board of Selectmen, she reworded it to read for legal clarity that if number 2 is if the trust has cumulatively committed 80% of trust assets in any action, including to purchase real or personal property, to borrow money, or to mortgage or pledge, that commits additional trust assets as collateral. She just reworded how we hit our 80% threshold. So
is the change cumulatively? Is that what was added?
it's still well, the change, it's actually the order of the wording. We had said that, we had said should the cumulative commitments of the trust, reach or exceed 80%. And so she put the cumulatively committed 80% up front, and then clarified that the commitment of trust actions is any action, including purchase, borrowing, mortgaging, pledging, is further definition.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's okay. Then, because we put those limits in, she added a condition to section C here, which says, it originally read, the trustee shall have full power and authority at any time and from time to time without the necessity of applying to any court for leave to do so, to expend 100% of the trust funds. She put in the condition up front, if authorized under subsection B. Simply because if the trust is going to hit 100% of its funds, that does require concurrence vote from the Board of Selectmen.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Under the component of treasurer collector as custodian, you'll notice in this section that simply stating that the treasurer collector is the custodian, and noting that the finance director shall issue checks is directed by the board, right? So that's normal town process. She did add a sentence, which was that the cost associated with the independent audit shall be borne by the trust.
How do they segregate? Is it an hourly rate that they apply to their review, their audit of any, if you will, group or
That's a good question. I don't know if it's an hourly rate or if it's just a fixed price and allocated, but I can ask that question.
just so that it's not arbitrary. Because this is something.
We might add, based on established rates from time to time, something like that. So that we don't. But there is a process.
The audit contract has to go out on RFP.
But does it have to
Right. So the
segregate line item by line item different audit documents?
So I assume there's an existing process for this because the town does a single audit, which includes like the water treatment plant and the sewer component and other enterprise funds, right? Which have their own audit requirements. So in those
But are all audits by outside agencies, or are they done internally? I mean, I'm not aware that that we are forced to do an outside audit. For example, I think for the school department, we have requirement of an outside audit, I think, every 5 years. In the meanwhile, the director of finance does an internal audit in other years.
So the town has an annual audit, outside audit.
Okay, well then that would include this as well, then, wouldn't it?
Right, it can. I mean, the trust could hire its own auditors. For example, the housing authority contracts with its own auditors because there are auditors that specialize in housing authorities, right?
Yeah.
And the specific regulations involved. Most housing trusts just are included with the annual audit of the town. And this would be the finance director would then let the trust know the component of the costs that were related to the work on the trust.
Yeah, as long as there's an outside auditor doing it that's contracted by the town, I think how the trust would get billed would be pretty simple. And again, it would be based on what the auditor's fee for that particular part of the audit would be. I think that's fairly simple. And as long as the town is forced to use an outside auditor, third party, I don't see that we need to complicate this.
Okay.
You may just want to, I suggest, ask Leah, how would this be determined? Did they have a formula or for this, just so we know what we're getting into and make it possibly in line with whatever other like enterprise fund.
I'll ask specific to the audit. I know, for example, that if the water enterprise fund needs services from the town engineering department, that there's an existing formula that's used, right? And so those formulas would be the same ones we would use. But I'll ask specific to the audit.
Okay.
And how that gets allocated. Okay. And those were the comments from town council. And then the red line of the declaration of the trust was specifically and only to make sure that the declaration of trust matched and was in synchronization with the content in the bylaw. And so we will do with the minor change we had. Once that bylaw is finished, we'll go back and just double check and accept or modify the declaration of trust as necessary. So we are able to start. I was able to start filling in some of the blanks. As far as we know, town meeting's on November 7th. And we know it'll be the Worcester South District Registry of Deeds and the Land Court and the Land Registration Office. So those components and highlights get filled in. I'm not sure if we need to walk through all of the red lines. If people want to, we can, but it was all just for consistency. And if people want to take a look, and if I've missed anything consistency-wise, just let Hank and I know. Okay, we'll head in that direction. Okay, so let me stop presenting. I always forget to stop presenting. Okay, so on to the last item on the agenda, is, new business. There are a few action items coming up, but as far as new business, at Tuesday night's Board of Selectmen meeting, recognizing that there's a potential opportunity or project for the trust to undertake, but that the timing, if the trust were to decide it wanted to get involved, the timing is such is that the trust would have to be appointed and up and running pretty quickly after town meeting on November 7th, because there's a time window related to that project. As such, the Board of Selectmen has agreed that to start looking to fill seats on the trust and to accept letters of interest, with the understanding, obviously, that someone might spend time drafting a letter of interest, and if town meeting for some reason didn't approve the trust, that obviously there would be no appointment. And so the Board of Selectmen is going to start advertising to solicit trustees. If there is anyone on this working group that's interested in serving on the trust, please feel free to draft a letter of interest. Let me know first and foremost if you want, but you don't have to. But I'm sort of curious who might be interested in serving. But we would also again need a letter of interest to be sent to the Board of Selectmen and start that process. Okay. And the Board of Selectmen, if you watch, this was during issues and correspondence. There was a feeling that even if the Board of Selectmen appointed 5 right away, so that the trust could start on this project and then work to fill the other 2 seats, that would be acceptable. Although I think there's a preference to fill all 7 if they can. Is my impression. Okay. Any other new business issues or concerns? Okay, hearing none. I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to thank Westborough TV for broadcasting and recording. Appreciate helping us have this important visibility and to facilitate engagement from the community. Unless something time pressing comes up, I expect we'll meet on our bi-weekly meeting again in 2 weeks, which puts us, let me look at, 2 weeks would be the 30th of October, at which point I expect we'll review the draft presentation or the presentation we plan to make at town meeting. We can make any edits at that point in time. And that still gives us time. If we felt we needed a final meeting before the 7th, we could do so that first week of November, although I'm not sure that'll be necessary. So with that said, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Nope. Usually isn't. So based on the order on my screen here, I'll do a roll call vote. Steve.
Durrett, yes.
Ed.
Bain, yes.
Valeria.
Yes.
And Roush.
Roush, yes.
And Edinburgh, yes. So we have a vote to adjourn at 5-0-0, 5 being present. Thank you all very much, and we'll reconvene in 2 weeks. And thank you again, Westborough TV.
Thanks.
Bye.